So, good evening, one and all. Welcome to the September meeting of the Ottawa Centre of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada. We've got a pretty full program tonight, lots of observations, so stick around to the end. And Chris, if we can move on, first order of business. This is the Royal Astronomical Society, and it is beholden upon us to take a moment to remember Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, who died yesterday, and I'm asking for a moment of silence to aid that remembrance. Okay, thanks, Chris. I think we can move to the next slide now. Usual preface to these meetings, it is a webinar, it is being recorded, and it will be available on our fabulously provisioned website, ottawa.rasc.ca. We ask that if you have speaker questions that you put them in the Q&A, because the chat comment, and sorry, raise your hand is disabled, but the chat comments can be seen by all anyway. So move on, please. So after this introduction and a little bit of blah blah from me, we'll have Dave Chisholm doing his autumn skies for this month. I'll then be back to look at the aftermath of the RASC General Assembly of 2022 and the very future of Canadian astronomy as we know it. Then we have Rick Scholes and Paul Klauninger with a lot of updates regarding the Fred Lossing Observatory, particularly the Rolf Meier Memorial Telescope and the commissioning, so to speak, of the Paul Commission Memorial Telescope. We'll have our break with AstroTrivia, then back with Rick Wagner on the third and final part of his presentations on RASC's Observer Certificate and the programs behind those. As I say, many observation reports, and closing out with the usual challenges and closing announcements. Next one, please. In the last month, 7 new members. So welcome, Simon, Dylan, Bob, Naboyshka, Malcolm, Joseph, and Victor. And anytime any of you want to volunteer to make a presentation here, you're more than welcome, and I will hound you anyway. 41 new members in total so far in 2022, which I think is not bad. Next, please, Chris. A bit of shameless commercialism. Orders for the RASC 2023 calendar close on September 15. There's an online website and links from the RASC website through which you can place your orders at $16 a piece or $30 for 2 or more, so to speak, $10 each, and $20 a piece for non-members. So September 15 deadline on all of that, and a reminder that we do have 4 locations for pickup around Ottawa, including myself here in Centretown. Next, please. Members in the news, Richard Taylor, what's he been up to? So a Milky Way photo by Richard, got a nod. I can't actually see the actual source there, Chris. This was in the Astro Imaging Certificates portion of the RASC.
Yeah,
Canada
this is the RASC
website.
National Office promoting the Observer Certificate program and choosing a photo from Richard Taylor to show it's for the I assume the wide field view certificate.
And a lovely shot it is. So well done, Richard. Next, please. Again, shameless huskering. huckstering. Membership benefits of joining the Royal Astronomical Society. They are at $103 for a regular membership, 97 plus individuals for family membership, and then $62.40 for students and youth under 21. Why would you pay that sort of money? Next. First of all, there are the physical benefits, such as access to the Ted and Meade Telescope Loan Library, access to the Fred Lossing Observatory, and to the Stanmont Library, provided that one of these days we actually get back into our normal venue at the Air and Space Museum. Meanwhile, you do have access to FLO. Next one. Printed material, Sky News bi-monthly magazine of RASC as a whole, the more scholarly journal quarterly as part of your membership. You will have the Observer's Handbook for 2023, which is fabulously useful in the event of a total blackout like we had after the directure. Finally, Astronotes, our local RASC Ottawa newsletter produced monthly and fabulously interesting reading. Next, please. My personal pick. Why do you want to join the RASC? It's about the people that you will interact with, both as co-members of the centre, the presenters that we have on board, and the expertise that they bring and make available to you should you choose to join. So please consider membership, www.rasc.ca for the Ottawa Centre. And with that, it's over to Dave for the September skies.
Okay, thank you, Mick. So let's take a look at what's happening in the September skies. Well, here are the moon phases I've highlighted tonight. We're almost at a full moon. Full moon's tomorrow night. The full moon is known by early indigenous tribes as the corn moon, and it's also known as the harvest moon. The harvest moon is the full moon that occurs closest to the September equinox each year, which is obviously September the 21st. We have a new moon on the 26th. Okay, why am I showing you October stuff? Well, the problem is our next meeting is October 14th, and I don't want you to miss the Draconid's meteor shower. So it's October 7th and 8th, and it was produced by dust grains left behind by Comet 21P Jacobini-Zinner. It was first discovered in 1900. It's a best viewing is in the early evening instead of overnight. Peaks this year on the night of the 7th. First quarter moon will block out all but the brightest meteors. You may catch a few good ones, but best viewings in the early evening from a dark location away from city lights. It will radiate from the constellation Draco, but can appear anywhere in the sky. As you can see, our days are getting shorter sunlight. Days are always the same length, but it means that we can get to our telescopes a little bit earlier. Mercury is really not visible this month. It's too close to the sun. Here it's rise and set times. Venus is not visible. It's rising and setting with the sun. Mars is visible in the late evening. By the end of the month, it's at the horizon at 10 o'clock. Jupiter, it's up there right now, visible in the evening and through the night, and as well as Saturn on the next screen. Again, it's visible in the evening. Uranus visible in the evening and through the night. And also Neptune at September 16th. Neptune is at opposition as well. And here's our cartoon of the month for you Trekkie fans out there.
Thank you, Dave. And before you go, I saw reference in the last couple of days to the fact that Jupiter at this opposition is the brightest that it's been for about 70 years. Now, I don't know if that's one of those marginal statements, but do you have anything more on that?
No, I hadn't. Well, I don't see Jupiter's not at opposition this month, but I hadn't seen anything about the, extra brightness, but I'll look into that maybe for next month.
Yeah. All I know is it's beautiful at the moment. So.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah. Yeah. In fact, at 10 o'clock tonight, if you look at it, the red spot's facing you. So it gets good pictures. So that means we have to finish early, but we got all these observation reports.
Gotcha. Yeah. Most of them about Jupiter taken in the last week. Anyway, okay, over to me. The aftermath of the RASC GA for this year and the future of Canadian astronomy. Yeah, I do a bio intro for myself. I used to work for the United Nations in East Africa. I'm originally from Southeast Australia with a genetic predisposition for space nerdiness, and I was lecturing neighbours when I was about 8 years old. So there we go. And obviously I have rocks in my head because I voluntarily retired from Kenya and Australia to come and live in Ottawa. So with all the caveats out of the way, Chris, next slide, please. You might remember back at the beginning of the year when I started coordinating these meetings, I had a few minor, subtle suggestions to make about how RASC Ottawa could get a more sort of international flavour to its proceedings, a bit of traction on the world stage. And a couple of minor spelling changes, a bit of a rearrangement of the stars in the seal there. And nothing came of it. Next, please, Chris. This concerns me. RASC values, you can read them on the main website. They're all about sharing knowledge and experience, developing collaboration and fellowship, enriching our communities through diversity, and discovery through the scientific method. And these are all great things to strive for. But, next please. I'm proposing that there is an image problem. For example, next please. Most of you will recognize this map of a well-known portion of the sky. You've got Orion, the mighty hunter, and Canis Major, his mighty hunting dog. Next, please. That is not a mighty hunting dog. That is a major wiener dog that's supposed to be accompanying the hunter. This doesn't make sense. Next, please. Are we really helping our credibility and reaching out to the broader community when we're presenting images like this? I argue not. Next, please. Second case, we have the big and small dippers. What are these? Spoons, heroic spoons that might have been used by Orion? Are they plows for mythical farming implements? No, we move along, please, Chris. And look at Ursa Major. Very popular constellation, points to the northern hemisphere's pole star. Remember, Dave, we do have one in the southern hemisphere. Next slide, please, Chris. In our fantasies, this is Ursa Minor, the little bear. And I'm asking you to have a look at this bear. Next slide, Chris. This is a bear. I took that photo at Park Omega. I've been there. I've seen actual bears. Note the absence of tail. This bear does not have a tail. Moving along, Chris. This is not a bear, and it doesn't have a tail either. And no, it's not a koala bear. It's just a koala. And yes, it comes from my part of the world. But the point being, it's not a good fit for this well-known constellation. Next, please. Our ability to uphold RASC values demands that we have credibility. We have to be able to put out a story that people unfamiliar with astronomy are going to resonate with, to get the idea. And so I have another modest proposal as to how we can achieve that. Moving along. I'm proposing a new ambassador for our collective avocation to bring a more global view of the celestial sphere. It has universal recognition, broad social appeal. It is respectful of Indigenous cultures. It is free of colonialist associations. It is fresh, innovative, attention-getting, with great potential for merchandising, and it is unsullied by any association with COVID. And so, ladies and gentlemen and children, I present to you, next slide, please, the quokka. What the hell is a quokka? I hear you collectively ask. Next slide, please. It is the world's cutest animal. It is fabulously cute. It is inadmissibly, adorably cute. I mean, look at that face. Is that a happy face? Is that a welcoming face? I'm proposing this should be the face of Canadian astronomy. Next slide, Chris. As you can see, it is a proper kangaroo. It hops on its back legs. It has a tail. It is a teeny weeny little kangaroo. Next slide, please. And it even has a pouch in which it raises its joeys. This is a wonderful animal. Next slide, please. What, I hear you ask, might quokkas have to do with Canadian astronomy? Next slide. Back to Ursa Major and everything wrong with trying to picture a bear there. Next slide. Here is a much better picture. Look at that. It's a natural fit. The quokka could, should, and perhaps ought to be the signpost to the northern pole star Polaris. Look at that, natural fit. Next slide. This is my nomination for Canada's next ambassador of astronomy. Who could resist? Next, Chris. Past image problem becomes an opportunity. Look at the potential. Next, please. An Australian icon, Crocodile Dundee. Everyone's heard of it, seen the films, blah, blah, blah. Next slide. It could be Crocodile Dundee. We could be leveraging all of Paul Hogan's massive global appeal and putting shrimps on barbies and whatever in a more family-friendly and inclusive manner. Next slide. What about here on Canadian home turf? Tim Hortons, brand name beyond any other. Next slide. Everyone knows Timmies have their roll up the rim contest. Next slide. We know they're famous for their Timbits. We as RASC should be reaching out to Tim Hortons, and next slide, please, working out a way to get the quokka into the Tim Hortons zeitgeist. I think the opportunity is there, another natural fit, and we're stupid if we don't exploit it. Next slide. Let's go to hockey's as Canada's national pastime. Look at this as an emblem. This is the Senators' lion thing. And it's like something straight out of Disney. It really isn't terribly original. My proposal, next slide, get the quokka face in there. It would be irresistible. Who could not endorse the Senators as the best hockey team on the planet with a mascot with a face like that? Moving along. Quokkas have star power, amazing attraction. And that's not an astronomy joke. It is a celebrity media joke. Next slide. For example, Chris Hemsworth, Australian guy, but who doesn't know him? The mighty Thor in the Marvel universe. And there he is. What's his companion of choice for that publicity photo? The quokka. Next slide. Here we have Margot Robbie, famous for Wolf of Wall Street, for that other silly thing with, you know, the Batman type characters, you know what I mean? And about to be in All About Barbie. Another celebrity, and what's her companion of choice? The quokka. Next up. Getting away from mere movie celebrities, here we have Roger Federer, one of the greatest tennis players of all time. And what is his companion of choice? The quokka. Again, Chris, please. Perry Hatcher, you might remember her from Lois and Clark, TV celebrity with a quokka, but not the only TV celebrity. We also have, next slide, please, the Cookie Monster with quokka in Australia. You see where I'm going, ladies and gentlemen. Next slide, please. This is a Quokka vision for 2022-2023, a 12-month blitz of PR and dazzling showmanship. For example, at star parties, we could have Andrea in a Quokka suit engaging with the younger members of our community. We can get endorsement by international celebrities. We can promote this through the UN, the Commonwealth of Nations, and leverage Canada's Governor General. We could even strive for coverage on Discovery Channel through sponsorships with sporting institutions and so on and so on. And so, Chris, thank you for your endorsement. If there are any questions, I'd love to take them. And I think we need to move these issues onto the agenda for the RASC General Assembly of 2023. Thank you. Okay, I take the lack of questions as a ringing endorsement. And so, Chris, can we move on to the next topic, please? Rick Scholes and Paul Klauninger are going to give us a fistful of updates on exciting developments at the Fred Lossing Observatory.
Okay, well, don't know quite how I move on from that one. It won't be quite so entertaining. I have noticed deer and porcupine at flow, but I have not come across a quokka yet, so I'll keep you posted on that. As most of you know, the Fred Lossing Observatory celebrated our 50th anniversary last year with a celebration in the fall. And at that time, we had one operational telescope, and we were busy working on setting up the two new ones that you see in the background of this photo. So during the 50 years of operation, we had basically the one telescope. Next slide, please. And that was the 16-inch club-built telescope located in this roll-off roof structure with the clubhouse in the background. And it was the workhorse built by Fred Lossing and his team, and it's now been donated to the North Frontenac Township and is in use at their dark sky site. So in 2017, we replaced that telescope with the telescope shown here, the Mike Wirth telescope, who's the donor, the generous donor of this fine instrument. It has at the moment 12 certified users, so there's plenty of room for new members and others to join and use the telescope. It's been certified to have very good optics by people who know better than I do, and it has full go-to capability, and its real strength, being a big light bucket, is of course deep sky objects, but it can be used for anything, of course. So just in the last week, next slide, please, we have now added our second capability has come online, and that's the Rolf Meyer Memorial Telescope, pictured here. So I released it to the hounds a week ago. A user guide was sent out by email, and it's dedicated to the memory of Rolf Meyer. It was his refractor and his dome structure that we have relocated to flow. So it was installed last year and basically just put in place just after our 50th anniversary celebration, and it's commissioned a week ago on September the 2nd. It is more of a manual telescope, does have a motor drive for tracking. Its real strength is, of course, planets and the moon. So I'm really looking forward to looking at Jupiter and Saturn and other planets this fall during prime time, and hopefully demoing it and training other people to use it. Next slide, please. This is just a screenshot of the user guide that I released a week ago. So if you didn't see the email with a link to this document, check your spam folder. It's there, or it should be there. There is a bit in the introduction about the history of this telescope and how it came to be at flow. The next slide, please. There's also a short 2-page quick reference guide that I published, and it's for users who are familiar with the telescope. I don't expect you to read it here, just to give you an idea. We have the full user guide for new users, and then a short version for more experienced users. Next slide, please. So these are just some of the key features of the refractor. It's got an 1800 millimeter focal length, so it's an f12 instrument. So if you have a 10 millimeter eyepiece, it'll give you about 180 times, and Jupiter looks pretty nice and big in this telescope. It's on a CI 700 equatorial mount, which has a motor drive for motion on fine motion only on both axes. It's not a go-to system, and it doesn't do motorized slewing. It has rates for sidereal and lunar tracking, and there is an NGC Micromax attached to it, which you can use if you wish for digital coordinate readout, although it does have a very fine set of manual analog setting circles. There's a Messier catalog built into that computer, so if you are looking for Messier objects, it will help you locate them. And Stephen Nourse has designed and added a very fine dome rotation crank to make rotating the rather heavy dome, it's 400 or 500 pounds, very easy with this crank. So I'd like to give demonstrations and training, and I'll certainly be at the next Flow Star Party on the 24th for those who wish, weather permitting, of course. We'll use a training program similar to what we do for the Star Master. And as you know, the use of the Flow site is a member privilege. If you wish to use the club telescopes, then there is a small additional fee just to help with maintenance and updates on them. So that's my email. If you wish to, if you're interested in learning more about Flow or this telescope or any of the others, then please contact me. And then to complement our planets specialty and our deep sky specialty telescope, we now have very shortly coming online the third instrument, which is the Meade 14-inch Paul Commission telescope. And it will be suitable for visual and astrophotography. And I'll turn the meeting over to Paul Klauninger at this point, who's the prime on getting this telescope running.
Thank you, Rick. Well, good evening, everyone. Exciting stuff happening at FLO. I feel a bit like we're like NASA. You know, they're planning the Great Observatories program, and I think we got to jump on them because, as Rick has detailed there, we've got some pretty exciting instruments at FLO. 2 of them actually online now and ready to rock, and the third one joining shortly, and that's the one I'm going to talk to you about. So this is a snapshot of the Paul Commission Memorial Telescope. Certainly members that have been around for a long time are acquainted with Paul Commission, and for those new members that may have heard his name, I want to take this opportunity to pay a tribute to Paul for his very generous donation of the 14-inch telescope, and to give you a quick look at what we're bringing online at FLO shortly with this instrument. So Paul Commission, he was born in Toronto in 1929 and attended Humberside College and McMaster University, where he earned his Bachelor of Arts in Economics and Business. And after working for many years in the lumber and steel industry in Toronto, he actually moved to Ottawa in 1972 to work for the Bureau of Competition Policy in the federal government. And he retired in 1989. So Paul was a lifelong member of the Knights of Columbus and also had a lifelong passion for astronomy. He actually served as president of our club from 1991 to 1993. Those of us who got to know him well affectionately refer to him as the Commish. And he used to do a regular segment at our meetings called The Cutting Edge, which was really the precursor to Al Scott's more current 10-minute astronomy updates. Paul would love to dig out stories from the many journals that he read and found those that tweaked his interest, and then provided a summary to us at our meetings of what he had learned. He passed away in February of 2018, and for a number of years prior to that, I began helping him out with the operation of his observatory as it became increasingly difficult for him to do so by himself. The brain was very sharp, but the body was starting to fail. So I actually quite enjoyed helping him out because, as it turned out, we had a number of similar interests in astronomy there, as I'll show you in a moment. Anyway, I got to spend some time with him. We used to have long talks about galactic structure and cosmology and such, and it was quite amazing for somebody that had no formal training in astronomy. He was very up to date on the stuff that he knew about, and that he could have a conversation with. I quite enjoyed our conversations, and certainly missed those conversations. So as I got to know him, I started getting him into things like image processing more, because many of the shots that he took with his telescope were just black and white. He wasn't really into the processing part of it. He just really wanted to see things that were really far away. But then he wanted to see color things, and so I got him into color imaging there, and I told him that, if you want to do color imaging, you pretty much have to do a bit of processing. For those of us who have dived into astrophotography know quite well what I'm talking about. Anyway, as those years went by and he became increasingly frail, he told me that he wanted to donate this lovely telescope that he was using to the club when he passed away. He knew his time was becoming short, and so I told him that I would certainly put that out to the club, that this was a very generous offer, and what we wanted to do with it. And so we of course we graciously accepted the offer, and I told Paul that I would sort of try to usher this along and make it happen. His wish was that an instrument like this shouldn't be sitting in a garage somewhere unused. It should be used to explore, and that's what he was hoping to pass on with the gift, is the opportunity for young folks that are getting into this, and for seasoned folks like myself who haven't delved into astrophotography to give it a hand, and without making a horrendously expensive investment up front before you even know if you can tolerate the stresses of astrophotography. Anyway, so he did bequeath the scope to us, and Paul passed away in 2018 rather. At that point in time, we after his passage and things were getting settled at his place, we went to his place. Chris offered use of his trailer, and we had other transport available there, and we collected Paul's scope and the accessories that came with it, and then graciously Chris offered to store the equipment at his place while we created our plans for the observatory. So next picture, please. So this is the kind of thing that Paul really liked to photograph with that telescope. We used to tease him about it because a lot of his images looked similar to this, and it was obvious that he had a love for faint fuzzies, as we called them. Objects that were extremely far away and that you would never see with the naked eye, but he was curious, he wanted to see them. And so for those of you that have listened to some of my presentations, I'm sort of the same bent. I like to see things way out in the universe there and see just how far my electronic eye will carry me. So this is the type of thing he really enjoyed, and as a result, actually the next one there, please, Chris. He actually roll on back there just for a second, Chris. I missed a point that I wanted to make there. You can see that at the top of the screen there. He was very diligent. I mean, I'm lucky enough to have a collection of his astrophotography, and he did literally thousands of images of these things. I think he used practically every night that he could. And he detailed the technical part of what he was looking at and the exposures. You can see that this one is NGC 705 and AGC 0262. It was 5-minute exposures, 2 exposures bin 2x2, and this was taken 11 years ago, actually. And back in 2011. The Omega Observatory, as you might see from the line up top, is what he affectionately referred to as observatory as, which was a purpose-built shed very close to his house with a roll-off roof. And so he could run his telescope from inside, which became inside his house, actually, which became increasingly important to him as his mobility started to decrease. So yeah, he was a master of the faint fuzzies there. So fast forward to the present, and the next slide there, Chris. So this is where his generous gift of the 14-inch telescope resides today at FLO. Not in a roll-off shed, but in a sky shed pod. But I am jumping the gun here a bit because it's been quite a long haul to get to this point since his passing. As I mentioned, he passed away in 2018, and we collected his telescope and accessories. But we had some work to do. The hard work was just beginning. Next slide, please. First, the site had to be terraformed a bit to accommodate the buildings that would eventually house the 8-inch Rolf Meier telescope that Rick talked about, and Paul's 14-inch Meade. Once the new mound was created, construction of the 14 inches new observatory could then begin in earnest. Next one, please. The observatory's deck platform was built by some hardy souls braving the onset of winter 2019. Here, Chris is laying out the foundation for the platform for the observatory. It's a good thing you love the winter, Chris. All that cross-country skiing definitely pays off, and enabling you to work well into the cold day. Next one, please. But of course, every project needs a supervisor, and to help keep Chris on track and keep him from freezing, Louisa, his wife, also pitched in. So my thanks to her. Next one, please. Oh, and here's a photograph I found of our stalwart astronauts editor, Gordon Webster, captured from above by Chris's drone. Gordon, if you're listening, I can't tell if you're smiling here or snarling and wondering what the heck you were doing out in the wild in the middle of the winter. But again, thank you for your efforts here, because you're part of the team that's made this happen. Next one, please. So once the observatory construction was complete, the scope was housed within it, and Tim Cole offered to help get it up and running. Tim is a long-term member with a lot of experience in high-end scopes as well, and so it was good to have him take the helm on trying to get the instrumentation working, because it's, as you can tell, it's not a simple looking telescope. Unfortunately, shortly after Tim started doing the work on this, COVID-19 struck, and work at FLO literally ground to a halt. I mean, it would be a year and a half before we could resume our efforts. So it was unfortunate, but it was the whole country was pretty much in the same conditions there. So all our efforts went to sleep for a while. And next slide, please. Once we did get past some of the restrictions and the limitations of COVID, the picky work and the gremlins were at hand, and the gremlins, they came a calling for sure. One of the nastier jobs that we encountered was the requirement to do a necessary firmware upgrade to the scope to get around a problem that prevented us from doing proper alignments and such. I won't get into the details here, but the firmware upgrade was there to fix that. But unfortunately, Meade didn't really consider the possibility that a user might be in a location without an internet connection, like FLO. Who would have thought that? And they didn't offer the firmware upgrade as something you could just download and install offsite. No, you had to have an active internet connection. So we had to pull the scope out of the dome and haul it back to Chris's garage to do the necessary upgrade, and then haul it back to FLO and remount it. So there's me trying to get my computer to talk to the telescope and the telescope to talk to my computer. And we had another 14-inch there as well. So why do one upgrade when you can do two? So we were doing it in tandem. All the while I was wondering how good a pair of binoculars this would make. Anyway, that's another story. But next one, please. So just before I describe some of the details of the scope, I just want to say thank you to everyone that was involved in getting this to this point. This instrument, you can see from the aerial view here, is currently sitting in the Skyshed pod on that platform. It's pretty healthy right now, and just requires a few more maintenance tasks. So I just want to thank everyone for their time and effort and experience in sometimes less than ideal conditions like this to bring us to where we are today. I'm very grateful for that, and I know the commission would be very pleased as well. So thank you again. Next one, please. So what have we got at hand here? This is where we are today. This instrument, unlike the other two instruments that Rick described, is primarily intended for astrophotography. As you can tell just by looking at it, even if you're not familiar with telescopes such as this, it's a bit of a complicated beast, and but it can do a lot of really cool stuff. It is basically a Schmidt-Cassegrain design with a built-in GPS receiver, so it can pull its time and location data from the GPS constellation of satellites. It's on a fork mount with an equatorial wedge, so it is a true equatorial telescope. You may have or know someone that has a similar tube mounted on forks there, but only on a tripod without the wedge. In that configuration, the same telescope would be an alt-az telescope and not really suitable for long duration astrophotography unless you had a field rotator. But we do have the equatorial wedge, so it is an equatorial telescope capable of doing long and short exposures. It has a 14-inch or 356 millimeter aperture, so quite large. And at f10, its native focal ratio. The focal length is 140 inches or 3,560 millimeters. It has full go-to capability, and there is an auto guider attached to it that will remain attached to it. And it has an RS-232 interface if you have a netbook computer that you're running software like a planetarium program on. You can connect to the telescope and run it with your computer via that RS-232 interface. It also has the scope also has a zero image microfocuser attached to it, which is for anybody that's familiar with Schmidt-Cassegrains, you know that image shift can be a problem. Once you get everything nice and aligned and you try to focus it, the coarse focusing of that design tends to lead to the image shifting out of your field of view, or can do so. With a microfocuser, the image stays very steady. And this is especially nice when you're trying to frame an image with a camera and to get the shot that you really want. So the goal is to make this telescope available to any club members interested in doing astro imaging with a high-end system like this. I'm currently writing a user manual for the system, and we will be conducting training sessions in its use, hopefully starting in the next few weeks after we get these last few maintenance issues sorted out. I'll be sending out an email to the club members explaining what we've got going here and the requirements for this scope. If you're at all interested in this, please have a careful read of this and let me know if you are interested so that we can gauge that level of interest to plan our training sessions. The scope is could become quite popular in use because of its pretty high end, and it is a very capable instrument. But as you can see, the space inside the Skyshed pod for a 14-inch instrument, it's I'll use the word cozy. You're gonna have to be very careful moving around there. And there's some also physical requirements. If you're going to use this scope, you have to be able to open the dome, which is completely manual. It's a clamshell, and so basically you have to be able to pivot one half of the dome over the other half to open it up for view. Anyway, we'll get into all those details in our email and in the sessions that I'm planning to give there. So just to give you an idea of the type of imagery that the scope is capable of, I'll show you some of the Commission's images from this scope, some of the ones that he was very proud of, and you can see for yourself. So next one, please. So again, this is the type of thing he loved galaxies, and with this telescope, you can get some pretty nice views of even smaller galaxies. The majority of galaxies that we can see with our telescopes are fairly small in their angular size. You know, exceptions are things like the Andromeda galaxy, of course, M33 and such. But the bulk of galaxies that we can observe, and there are literally millions of them, tend to be very small objects, so you need a very long focal length to be able to see and or image them. And most of them are so faint that the only way you're going to be able to see them is with some electronic assistance through imaging there. So this is the type of thing he loved to do. Next one, please. This one as well. This is the Terrific Nebula, and you'll notice that all his shots were to this point in time were in grayscale. He was using a very sensitive CCD astronomical camera to gather these images, so he could really use that camera to get deep out into the universe there, and also to provide some awesome structural detail of closer in objects like the Terrific. But he did start getting interested. He told me one night, Paul, I just want to get, in his voice, he would say, Paul, I'm just curious. I want to get color images. And I said, well, you can do that there, but there's a bit of a learning curve involved there. But this is one of the things that really impressed me with Paul Commission is that even though when I started spending more time with him, he was already into his mid 80s there, and he had the enthusiasm of the teenager there. He was really just keen on trying, different things, and he would listen and ask questions. It was really nice conversing with him about that. And so he bought himself a color camera. Next one, please, Chris. And started doing color imaging. And this is one he was quite proud of there. It was one that he compared with a similar image from the Hubble Space Telescope and of the Ring Nebula there. And you can see there's quite a good correlation there, considering the Hubble Space Telescope was many times the size of his Omega Observatory scope, and also in a nice orbit well above the Earth's atmosphere. And he was in the outskirts of Barrhaven with his 14-inch, so he was doing quite well. The other one, the next one there, please, Chris. The next one that he really enjoyed. This is the Orion Nebula. I mean, for those of us that have gotten into astronomy or astrophotography, I think this is one of the go-to objects for people to start imaging. It's bright, it's big, it's just it's a wonderful target. And he was completely thrilled when we got those color images, those first color images of the Orion Nebula coming down from his camera. And I think his desire to do color imaging was certainly satisfied with that. And unfortunately, I was just getting into some heavier details with him about image processing. I first had to convince him that Paul, I said to him, you really need to get a mouse for your computer, because he would run most of his stuff with the little finger keypad. And I said, there is no way you're going to do processing in Photoshop or anything else using this. You will go mad, trust me. So he did that, and he listened and learned, and he started doing the color processing. I wish I could have gone farther on that with him, but unfortunately he did pass away not long thereafter. So that just gives you an idea of the type of stuff that he does. So a lot of this stuff was with very minimal processing, and again, the scope really came through for him, and it is my hope that it will do so for any of you that are out there willing to climb a bit of a learning curve. It's a bit steep in places, but certainly not insurmountable. And as proof, those are images from Paul taken a number of years ago when the scope was out in his observatory. But in the last while, as I've mentioned, we've been doing a lot of work getting it ready for the membership. And a couple nights ago, Richard Taylor and I were out doing some work on finalizing polar alignment and stuff. And Richard took some neat shots just to try to test it out. Richard has actually volunteered to be our guinea pig. Can I use that term? Yeah, our test subject. And so I said to him, well, listen, you know, we've done this work here tonight. Why don't you? I think he was going to show some of these images in the observers images section. I said, well, just drop them into our presentation here because it's very appropriate. So I'm going to turn this over to Richard, and he's going to give you first impressions of using the 14-inch Paul Commission telescope and some of the joys and maybe frustrations that he had getting these images. So I'll turn it over to Richard for the next few slides.
Okay, well, I guess I'm not really a guinea pig, but by Mick's take on things, I must be a quokka, right? Okay, well, thank you, Paul, and thank you to all the other volunteers who put together this wonderful observatory. I feel very honored that I am one of the first people to actually take some pictures through this telescope since Paul passed away. Anyway, so when we were out there on Wednesday night and Thursday morning, the moon was just brilliant. It was a very large gibbous moon, and I was trying to aim at Saturn to begin with because it was just above and to the left of the moon. We had it nicely centered in the eyepiece. Everything seemed to be working well. So I took out the eyepiece, popped in my astro camera, and could see nothing. It was completely different focus. So after struggling with that for a few minutes, I said, well, look, we're not going to be able to find Saturn if it's completely out of focus. It's much too dim, but we've got this brilliant moon right beside us here. So let's aim at the moon and try it on that. Well, that was successful because at least you could see that the camera was working. You could see a big white glow. And then we had to turn the focus a long, long way to change it. And eventually we had to take off the star diagonal that we were using for the eyepiece and put the camera in place of the diagonal. And that was successful. As you see here, we did get a nice picture of the moon. And this is actually the challenge object, the lunar challenge object for this month, the crater Borealis in the lower right on the picture. So this is a approximately 3 or 4 minute video. And then I used PIPP and AutoStacker to pull out the best frames and stack them up. It was drifting a fair deal because we forgot that we should change the tracking motion to the lunar rate instead of the sidereal rate. So the video was not as steady as it could have been. Once I switched to Saturn, next picture. Once I got the focus on the moon, I could get Saturn in the field of view. Sorry about the colors. This was a very quick processing the next morning when I was still half asleep. So it's a bit green there, but it does show the level of detail we were getting on Saturn. I think I can do better, but this was, again, taking the best 20% of the frames from a 3-minute video. Next one, please. Jupiter was wonderful. It was much easier to focus because the image was very, very large on the screen. And we also had the nice shadow of the moon Io right in the middle. So it was pretty easy to find something to focus on. And I'm pretty happy with the level of detail. I think, again, could probably do better with, waiting for steady skies, taking longer videos, stacking up a smaller proportion of them. But I think it really shows the great possibilities of this telescope. But as I say, the focusing is a bit troublesome. It was nothing like what the eyepiece focus was at. So I did have to have a very bright object, the moon, to find the right place for focusing. Anyway, so I'm really looking forward to keeping on working with this telescope and learning all its ins and outs. And I think you'll be seeing some great pictures coming from it. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. So I'm just going to sum up here. So Richard, does this mean that you'll come back and want to do some more on that telescope?
Yes, I will definitely want to come back and do more, and I'll certainly be willing to help out if anything I can do with the proofreading of the user manual and being your quokka.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much, and again, thank you for your help. It was a pretty late night there, and being glutton for punishment, I stayed much longer than I probably should have, but that's okay. So thank you, and I'm just going to close it off by saying I've got a couple of shots that I've taken myself. These weren't taken the other night or anything, but just because I've been doing some work out there over the last few months to try to get things ready. And just to evaluate the condition of the optics and everything else for myself. And so I include these because I want to mention that all the shots that I've shown you so far for this telescope, they were all taken with somewhat high-end astronomical dedicated CCD or CMOS cameras there. So cameras that were designed for this for this pursuit, but the scope isn't limited to that. Like, and I wanted to stress this though, because one of the things that we'll be saying for this is that we hope to provide the telescope as a ready to play instrument with necessary cables and adapters for some common cameras. The only thing that an interested person will need to supply is their own specific camera, and if you run your camera as some of us do with like a notebook computer or something like that, you'll have to bring your own computer. But the cables and everything else will be ready for you there. And even with a stock DSLR camera that many of us have, you can take some phenomenal pictures. It's like with a DSLR attached to this telescope, it's like having a telephoto lens that's over 3,500 millimeters in length. So you can imagine what you can get with it. So just a couple of samples of the moon, quick examples there. I used one of the opportunities I was out there to take a nice high-res shot of the southern hemisphere of the moon, considering just sort of following my interest in the southern polar region. And Tycho happened to be cooperating very nicely with its rays that night. Last one, please. So just another image I took the same night there of the northern hemisphere of the moon there. And again, these are single shots, actually with no processing on these at all, no stacking or anything, just single shots with a DSLR, again, just to evaluate the operation of the scope in that. So I'm pretty pleased with what I'm seeing there. I think we're going to have a very capable instrument in our hands, and that is what I'm hoping to share with you. And thank you again, Paul Commission, for wherever you are in the universe, for your very generous gift. So I will be sending out that email shortly and providing you with details of what we're planning for this scope there, and I hope to hear from a number of you. That's it for me this month. Clear skies, everyone.
Well, I don't know what to say. First of all, I have to say thank you for the first time in my residency to 3 speakers. So Rick, Paul, and Richard, thank you all. Secondly, I think it's the first time that there's been a single presentation that has spanned history, practice, and potential in the way that you've done tonight. I think it's fabulous. The personal story of Paul, the experiences of Chris and Paul and others in getting the thing going, and Rick's work with pulling up the Rolf Meier and so on. It's fabulous. I'm going to use my prerogative to ask a question, but Chris has also got some comments to make, and the greedy part of me says I'm going to go first. Question. Let's imagine I've got a young, interested, enthusiastic, amateur nephew who is toying with the notion of trying to find out about the ins and outs of astrophotography. Do I take it as read that RASC Ottawa does not have the equipment to kickstart such an interest, i.e. my nephew or niece would need to show up with their own DSLR or an equivalent camera?
So you're asking whether we will be supplying a camera of some sort?
Is that it within the scope of the plans to have even a beginner camera available for absolute beginners?
Well, you know, it's an unfortunate part of the story, which I didn't mention, is that part of Paul Commission's gift to us was his basically his entire setup, including a lovely Canon 60D Astro DSLR. Which was the intention there was to have that as part of the kit that we would make available, and so you wouldn't even need your own camera. But unfortunately, that camera has passed away after some testing and such, and so that is no longer an option. That is something perhaps I could put to counselor if there would be funds available. Once we gauge the level of interest in using this facility, if there is a suitable level of interest, would funds be available to perhaps even just a stock DSLR that would enable people with no equipment to explore this really interesting topic. So currently we don't have such a camera, but that's not to say that will remain that way.
Yeah, I'm putting that out there as perhaps a bit of a horse and cart issue, and that, gosh, if there was a donation, or gosh, if council would buy up, then a way to engage would be in our hands that we don't have otherwise. But anyway, we're not going to thrash this now. Chris had some other points to raise.
Thank you, Mick and Paul. I wanted to go back and look at one slide that Paul showed here and explain something.
I remember that day.
Oh, remember this day all too well. But people may be curious, why are there 2 identical telescopes being worked on at the same time? And interesting story. Several years ago, as Paul said, when Paul Commission donated the 14-inch Meade that you see on the left side, we simultaneously received a donation of a second identical telescope from an anonymous donor. We've kept it in storage. We've even interchanged the 2 briefly in the Skyshed pod, but we've determined that the Ottawa Centre does not have need for that second telescope. It was put up for sale briefly on consignment at Focus Scientific, and I rescued it days before Focus Scientific passed away. And we now have this second telescope, and it is available for sale. We haven't advertised it. I was intending shortly to put out an email to the membership, letting people know about it, but here's a perfect opportunity. There's an identical LX200 full GPS available for sale for $3,000. And I'll send out details by email. Also, both of you, Rick and Paul, have talked about emails going out to members, which may cause some members to doubt why they don't see such emails. It's maybe my once a year annual plug on emails. The center has a members emails list, but it requires people to give consent to join the list on registration or on renewal of registration, or by specifically asking. So if you're not receiving these emails that you hear people reference to, send an email to me, secretary at Ottawa.RASC, and I'll make sure you get added to the email list. Thanks, Mick.
All right, and thank you, Chris.
Just a quick follow-up to you, Mick. You know, I sort of only partially answered your question there about the camera, but I do want to be upfront on this. This is not a beginner's telescope. It's pretty high end, and there's definitely a learning curve. And the other thing is that the space inside that sky shed is pretty tight. And if somebody were to be, accidental there and nudge it, this scope is not mounted on a pier. That is something that perhaps we are considering going forward. We'll have to see how well it gets used, and if we do run into accidents. It's sitting on a tripod which is stabilized on concrete blocks which goes through the platform, so they're not in contact with the platform. This is to minimize vibration. So that's a stable configuration, but it wouldn't take too heavy of a nudge to knock that even just a bit off those blocks, which would certainly ruin our polar alignment and put the scope back in a state where we'd have to get out there and realign it mechanically. The scope is not friendly to align from doing a polar alignment and such. But yeah, so care will have to be taken, and I will be emphasizing that strongly in the manual there. So it's I mean, two people can get inside that. Certainly, Richard and I were in there with the scope, and I've been in there with Chris and stuff. But we're aware of the space limitations there, and so we tread around there like we're walking on nitroglycerin or something. Others may not be as aware how vulnerable it is, and it's something I will stress in the training there. But yeah, a scope like this definitely. With adult supervision, I don't know how old was it your nephew, did you say, or a nephew that you know?
The hypothetical nephew.
Hypothetical nephew, yes. So, if your hypothetical nephew was accompanied by an adult that would help them along navigating that tight space, that would be good. But it is definitely not a beginner's instrument.
And from what I've seen from Andrea's comment, she's in total agreement.
Oh.
Look, if there are no questions coming up on the Q&A, I will again thank all three of you for your time and presentation. Again, I think it was great. I hope there's follow-up. I hope there's interest in these instruments. And, well, looking forward to this fourfold increase in FLO's capability. So thank you.
You're welcome.
And so Chris, our bio break challenge. I'm feeling a bit expansive. I'm going to make it a 7-minute break tonight because we're a little bit ahead of schedule. So our trivia question to ponder while you're bio breaking is to consider the important historical fact that links bacon squares, peaches, sugar cookie cubes, pineapple grapefruit drink, and coffee. And yes, we're looking for an astronomical, astrophysical, astronautical context. 7 minutes. Thanks all. Okay, everyone, I hope we're back. We had a couple of pictures answering the question, what important historical fact links bacon squares, peaches, sugar cookie cubes, pineapple grapefruit drink, and coffee. And Larry Penn was the first one off the blocks with the correct answer. It was the first meal consumed on the moon by Armstrong and Aldrin. A number of follow-up answers came in, but Andrea and the others, sorry, you were just too late. You don't get the elephant stamp this month. Next presenter is Rick Wagner. If you weren't here for the last two meetings, he's another of our long-term members, a prolific contributor of observations, particularly about variable stars. He's done rotation periods on asteroids, image transuranian objects, gamma ray burst afterglows. He's our resident photometrist, and tonight he's here to do his third presentation regarding, next slide please, Chris.
Thanks, Mick. So good evening, everybody. It's good to be here again talking to you all. 2 months ago, I talked about the wide field imaging certificate. Last month, I covered the solar system certificate, and tonight I will close out the series with the third and final deep sky certificate. Next, please. So to recap, there are the three different certificates. They are all available only to RASC members. If you go to the website, rasc.ca Astro Imaging Certificate, you can see all the details on the requirements for each certificate. Download the application forms and see a list of those who have already received their certificates. And RASC Astro Imaging Zenfolio.com has all the images that have been submitted. Next, please. So the Deep Sky certificate is obviously focused on imaging targets mostly beyond the solar system, within our galaxy and beyond. Now, because comets require techniques much more akin to deep sky imaging than other solar system objects, they also include those under this certificate. The certificate is moderately prescriptive. You have to image 2 examples of each of the most common types of deep sky objects, but of course you get to choose which particular examples. Next, please. So the goal of the certificate is to develop the basic skills in long exposure imaging of generally small, faint objects in the sky. Composition, your target should be well framed and sized. So in other words, it should fit within the frame. Now you can get away with some maneuvering on that. For instance, if you take a picture of a portion of IC 1396, then you can say, well, I was actually taking a picture of the elephant trunk inside IC 1396, something like that. And the other thing, of course, is we don't want some teeny little green dot in the middle of a frame of stars. It's got to be some detail visible. Tracking, getting around stars can be quite a challenge. Focusing, the stars should be small and or sharp details in whatever you're shooting. Next, please. And finally, probably one of the biggest learning curves is the image processing. Hot pixels should be controlled in your images. You do that by shooting and applying dark frames. If you get vignetting from your telescope or your camera lens, that should be corrected using flats. Noise should be minimized. Proper exposure and stacking. You can always use an ultra high ISO or short exposures and then stretch the heck out of an image, but you're going to get something that's really noisy and ugly. So hence, it's better to start with proper exposure, and that way you get enough signal level. No clipping. Clipping is when the background goes to dead black, which should never happen. It should always be a dark gray. And white clipping is, for example, when your stars turn into little white disks, or the center of a bright nebula is blown out, that kind of thing. And finally, you should stretch the images to show detail in both the faint and bright parts of the object. Next, please. So the requirements, a total of 12 images. For each image, you have to document your equipment and settings, the location, date and time, the processing that you did, any planning that you did, problems you encountered, interesting circumstances and stuff, just to add some human interest to it. So next, please. So the first of the 6 requirements is 2 pictures of emission or reflection nebulae. I chose this image of M42, taken with my Canon 60DA on a Takahashi refractor. The challenge with this object, this is one where it's very easy to clip or blow out the center of the nebula because it's very bright. So in this case, I shot 15-second, 60-second, and 240-second images, stacked them all together, and then overlaid the 3 of them in Photoshop and carefully erased and manipulated to blend them all together. Next, please. This is the Flaming Star Nebula in the center of Auriga. That's a lovely area, lots of open clusters, bright stars. You can see some nice colored stars in the center there. This is a case where I was experimenting and actually shot these at ISO 12,800 and just shot a whole bunch of them to see if that was enough to cancel out the excessive noise in each frame, and it came out pretty well, but it still seems to be better to shoot around ISO 800, 600, or 1600 rather, and get smoother images to start with. Next, please. You need 2 images of spiral galaxies, spiral because the ellipticals are pretty boring. So this is M33, the spiral galaxy in Triangulum. This is about 2.5 hours with the Canon 60DA on a 10-inch Schmid-Newtonian. I was quite pleased to see that you can actually see individual stars in the galaxy here. So I'm looking forward in the future to actually starting to do photometry on some of the stars in M33. Next, please. Here's NGC 4725, which has a very confusing, to me, type specification, an SAVRSB peculiar galaxy. So there's a bar, there's peculiar arms. I think it might be a Seyfert galaxy, which is the the very bright core. Main thing about this image is it shows you don't have to do the color. You can submit black and white images. Next, please. So 2 images of planetary nebulae. Planetary nebulae are generally more difficult because most of them are very small. The Helix is the largest bright planetary nebula in the sky. So this is again with the 10-inch Schmid-Newtonian. And I loved the subtle colors, the softness of a delicacy of the nebulosity in this one. Next, please. So here's the famous Ring Nebula. And for this one, I actually used something more akin to planetary techniques. This is with the Boltwood 16-inch, a 2x Barlow, and a 178 color planetary camera with 110-second exposures and 15-second exposures, eliminating any that were trailed, and then stacking them all and messing around. I thought it turned out pretty well. It shows some of the nice streaks across the center of the donut, and nice modeling in the ring itself. Next, please. 2 pictures of open clusters. So this is, of course, the double cluster, and then NGC 957 is off on the left edge of the frame. Next, please. The Pleiades, although the nebulosity is perhaps the most obvious thing here, it is in fact a very impressive open cluster with something like 1,000 stars. So in this case, I fiddled a bit. I took most of my exposures just as normal through with the Canon 60DA through a Takahashi refractor, but I did also take another 5 images with thread stretched across the aperture of the telescope to make diffraction spikes. And I stacked those images separately and then applied them as a separate layer in Photoshop so that I could blend in the diffraction spikes on the stars. I rather enjoy diffraction spikes. Next, please. 2 pictures of globular clusters. So this is, again, with the 10-inch Schmid-Newtonian. M13, the great cluster in Hercules. And this was with a new camera. This was my first sort of serious attempt at imaging with the ASI 2600 color camera, 8 5-minute exposures. These are another target where it's very easy to blow out the center core as you try to pull the fainter stars out of the periphery of the globular. The core can get blown out and turn into just a solid white disk. Next, please. This is M5 with the same setup. Next, please. So the final requirement allows you the choice of dark nebulae and or comets. So I did 1 of each. This is Barnard's E, which is just a little west of Altair. And it's a dark nebulosity against, so clouds of gas and dust with the star field behind them. And I love the star field. It's so dense, so many teeny little stars. And next, please. And this is Comet Lovejoy from back in 2014. Still one of my best ever comet images. This was actually stacked in Deep Sky Stacker, which has a special function where it will actually look at your because the comet is moving, it drifts across the field of view. And so what Deep Sky Stacker does is it actually stacks the stars stacks on the comet, figures out which is which, subtracts one from the other, and messes around, and then overlays the two images. And you end up with a picture of the comet where neither the stars nor the comet is trailed. So very nice facility. Next, please. So finally, having taken all your images, you scale them to 1200 pixels or less, name them to match the requirement. Let's see, you can zip them all into a single folder if you like, add the completed application form and documentation, and then email them off to the RASC imaging at rasc.ca. And you should hear back, I find, generally within a couple of days. Any questions?
Thank you, Rick. And once again, I'm so glad to hear of your affectation for diffraction spikes. I think it's beautiful that you admit this in public. I do have a question, maybe more of a clarification. Anyone seeking to earn this certificate, are they able to use robotic telescopes, whether or not operated by RASC?
I believe you can use a robotic telescope, but it has to be your own robotic telescopes. You're not allowed to use remote telescopes that are, run by another organization, for instance. So you couldn't use the RASC remote telescope.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. I don't see any other questions at the moment. There were lots of comments in the chat about the quality of your images. But otherwise, with that, I will say thank you and move us along to the observation reports. Chris, move it. So here's our order of presenters for tonight, starting with Oscar, please.
Hey, good evening, everyone. So I've just got one image to present tonight, which is this image here. It's of the fireworks galaxy, NGC 6946. I'm just looking for my notes. I'm surprised to see that it was first. So this is a spiral galaxy on the border between Cepheus and Cygnus. It's located some 25.2 million light years away, which puts it at about a similar distance to MSDA 101. The galaxy was first discovered by William Herschel on September 9th, 1798. So exactly 224 years ago tonight. It's slightly smaller than the Milky Way, or I guess a third time smaller than the Milky Way, at only about 40,000 light years in diameter, and it contains only about half as many stars as the Milky Way. Due to the extremely active star-forming regions, you can kind of see it in the image, the sort of red, magenta-y kind of areas in the galaxy. Those are active star-forming regions. It's classified as a starburst galaxy. In the 20th and 21st century, over 10 supernovae have been observed in this galaxy, which is about 10 times the rate of that in the Milky Way. So that is earned. That's where the galaxy earns its moniker, the fireworks galaxies, from the active supernovae. So this image is 46 5-minute sub-exposures for about almost 4 hours of exposure, 10 minutes short, using an ASI 533 MC Pro. It was taken through an 8-inch Celestron Edge HD at f7, and it was actually captured on August 5th, the night of our last RASC meeting. That's it for me tonight. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Oscar. And a note to all the images out there, I like to get your write-ups on circumstance, context, and equipment used, so that when your images go up on the website, there is additional information for those that are going to be observing those images in 3,000 years' time. Okay, with that said, next, please.
Okay, this is not in order. So I have a story to tell. I'm very new to this. I came out to the public star party. I met Andrea. I came out to the flow site last month. And I've been doing this now since last fall. What makes what I'm doing, I think, a little unique to all of you, or perhaps reminiscent of your long past youth, is that my equipment, you can see it right here over my right shoulder. That's it. It is a stock DSLR with standard lenses. So I'll speak to what's on the screen right now. That was taken at flow. That's what I intended to get. So I've got, if I remember correctly, that's Eagle and Omega and the small cluster at the bottom. That is a Sony Alpha 99 with a Minolta 300mm lens. About 55 minutes worth of exposures were used, and with relatively minor processing. I have two issues. I don't know what I'm doing yet with the processing, and I am rather significantly colorblind. So I have to have someone standing over my shoulder to constantly beating me saying, "No, it's too pink, it's too pink, change that." So whatever's next picture, please. This was also taken at flow. Not my best picture ever of the Milky Way, but I was quite happy, or I was quite taken by this. This was actually an hour and a half's worth of exposures, most of which had to be discarded because there was too much condensation on the lens. Something else I learned that night. So you've got about 30 minutes there. It's taken with a 16mm fisheye lens, and that was the Milky Way straight overhead. I liked the way it turned out with the halos around the stars from the dew on the lens, but also the fact that it's, when I look up and I see the sky, that's what I see at the really bright colors that we tend to get with Milky Way pictures. I mean, I've never seen it that bright. So next picture, please. Okay, this was, oh, I know what's happened. This was the first set of pictures I put up. Okay, this was taken the night of the last meeting. This, of course, is NGC 7000. That was the monthly observing challenge. So once the meeting was out and we had a clear sky, I went out onto my driveway, pointed the camera straight up in the sky, and I took that picture. And you've got a total of about 30 minutes. Again, the Sony 99 with a 135mm lens. Are there more pictures?
No, Mark, those are the three that I received from you. So if you sent more, unfortunately, I wasn't aware of it.
Okay, I've got I had put a bunch up on the Dropbox, but that's fine. So
we'll consider them for next month.
Okay, and I have to say I got rather excited when someone talked about connecting a stock DSLR to that magnificent telescope that is about to become available. Going from a 300mm focal length to a 3000mm focal length. I don't know if I can manage that, but I'll try. So that's what I'm up to. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. And again, I'll just go back to Andrea Geron's comments during the earlier presentation. Maybe you want to touch base with her about what that step up would look like, and never apologize for being an early astrophotographer. Normally, I would put you at the top of the list, so you get your stuff out there early and well. So keep trying, and we'll see you next time with those
Thank you.
same photos, I guess. Chris, next.
Hello, everybody. I've been enjoying solar observing these days. And this is a composite image of prominence activity on the sun's periphery and the solar surface detail at that particular time. By stacking a 10-second video of the prominences with registacks, I was able to get varying degrees of prominence detail along the disk, as subtle as it is. Next one, please. This is another composite, and here on the solar surface is a group of sunspots known as an active region. By the way, all the images you're going to see are taken with the Lund 60mm H-alpha solar scope and the Malencam Sky Radar camera. Some light post-processing was done on all captures using Topaz Studio 2. Next one, please. And here is another one. I find that the sun is so dynamic and there's always something new to see. Next one, please. So this is the biggest prominence that I've captured. The photo is colorized to show some definition in the body of the prominence. Next one, please. And this is the same prominence captured not as a composite, but one close-up single image. And I've been able to manipulate the gain on the camera to get a lot more detailed features of the prominence only. Next one, please. This composite image shows prominences and surface detail, as well as the sunspot active regions. Now, regarding sunspots, from what I've read, as the sun rotates at different speeds, with the equator rotating faster than at the poles, a differential rotation is created, which in turn creates a disturbance in the many sun's magnetic fields. And this can result in small pores forming, as you can see to the right of the big sunspot in the middle, and also at the bottom part of the image. These pores can grow and join together to form larger pores or protospots that eventually become sunspots. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. And who's up next, Chris? Richard Taylor.
Okay, before I start talking about this particular image, I'd just like to remind you back of the earlier image that was shown about members in the news. That picture of the Milky Way over a lake is, it was taken a few years ago now, but that was from a cottage that I've just recently returned from. It's very, very close to the North Frontenac Dark Sky Preserve. And now that I've found this cottage, we've been going back every year during some dark phase of the moon to try and get more dark sky pictures. It's a wonderful location, very dark. And this particular cottage has a nice, gently sloping lawn down to the lake with a beautiful view to the south. So that's where I took all of the pictures that I'm going to be showing tonight, except this one. This picture is the North American Nebula again, NGC 7000, taken a few years ago, 1995. And in 1995, I had recently bought one of the RASC Lone Library telescopes that was too big and complicated to be a loaner. took a long time for me to learn how to use it. But one of the first things I learned how to do was use the telescope and its motor drive as a tracking mount for my DSLR, no, not my SLR camera, film camera with a long telephoto lens, a 135mm telephoto lens. So this is a film picture using Kodak Gold 1000, 5-minute exposure approximately, because I was doing this by hand, holding down the cable release on the camera and trusting the little mark on the lens for focusing. So it's not beautifully focused, it's not beautifully tracked, but there it is, there's the North America Nebula. And if you squint, you can just see that maybe there's the Pelican Nebula beside it. So I kept trying for many, many years to learn new techniques and get better equipment. And so next picture is this year's version. Now this is taken using my William Optics Z73 telescope with a Canon M100 camera tracked on a Star Adventurer mount. And now, of course, I've learned a whole bunch more about image processing. So it's a stack of, how many? 20 3-minute exposures, stacked in Deep Sky Stacker, processed in PixInsight, and final merging of 2 frames in Photoshop, because this object is just too big to fit in a single frame of my camera. As you can see, I've got a lot more detail. I'm still working on how to reduce the stars. They're a bit too big and fuzzy. Anyway, we'll keep trying for many more years, I'm sure. Next one. Now, this is this year's version of the Trumpet Nebula. This is using my ASI 178 MC camera on the same telescope. So it takes a much smaller field of view. Beautiful colors in this one. I'm quite happy with the way it looks, except again, my stars are too big and fuzzy. So we'll keep working on the image processing. Next one. So just south of the Trifid, of course, is the Lagoon Nebula. And this is back on the M100 camera on that telescope. So it's a bigger field of view, it's a bigger object. And we've got that nice golden cluster just to the south of the lagoon as well. That's an M object, but I forget which one, sorry. So I'm quite happy with the Lagoon Nebula this year. This is a stack of 42 2-minute exposures. And that was using my 178 MC camera as a guide camera. So it was tracking very, very nicely that night. Next one, please. And here's something I've never taken a picture of before. This is Pluto. This is a little animated GIF file. So you should be able to see in the lower middle, one tiny star that's jumping across. And that's because it's not a star, that is Pluto changing position from August 20th to the 23rd, to the 26th, to the 31st. So this is using a map that was provided by Sky and Telescope in their July issue. I found a star hopping method for getting from the handle of the teapot of Sagittarius over to a very empty region of the sky in the south. And then I had to aim at exactly the same place 4 nights to get this collection of images. But there I have captured Pluto, and I'm very amazed at the equipment that I've got, such a small telescope, and yet I can capture stars even fainter than Pluto. And Pluto was at magnitude 14.3 approximately. So I'm getting stars down to something like magnitude 16 or 17 in that image. Anyway, that was my bucket list item for this year. I have captured Pluto. Thank you. That's all for me tonight.
Wow.
Richard, job well done. In fact, 2 jobs well done. Digging up old photos, I strongly commend to all you images out there. I like to get them up on the website so that we can see a continuum, a stream from the mid-90s all the way back to the mid-60s on how imaging techniques have improved. So I thank you for that. Secondly, the animated GIF, those 2 are going up as shorts on the website. They may not show up in Astronodes or otherwise normally, but wherever possible, I pull them out, get them up on YouTube as separate things. So please keep providing. Thank you. Next up.
Before I start, I just want to say that picture that Richard took of NGC 7000, the North American Nebula, that was very impressive film. I never made it work. It was very well done, Richard. This is a challenge object. If there's no diffraction spikes and they're kind of gray looking, it's probably a galaxy. It's 417 million light years away, almost 500 million light years away. And there are 88 galaxies that are obvious in this picture, and maybe 200 in total. Next image. This is the major thing in here, 6166. And when you realize how far away this galaxy is, this galaxy is monstrous. And it's about 225 light years across. It's one of the largest galaxies known. It appears to be actually, if you look closely at it, you'll see it kind of divided up a little bit. It appears to be 4 galaxies, but they all have different redshifts. So it may, in fact, be 4 galaxies kind of superimposed on each other from different parts, of different depths from us here. Okay, next image. This is another challenge object. Looks actually pretty boring. Next. Until you zoom in a bit. Next. And what you see is that the bluish color suggests that it's a reflection nebula. The blue light bouncing off dust. It's about 6,000 light years away, and it's about 10 light years across. The new formed stars are hidden behind the dust that formed them. Next. The cave is at the top center. It's about 2,400 light years away. A shock wave at the edge of the dark cave is causing stars to be formed. I actually took it because it looks pretty. Next. Andromeda is high in the sky right now, in the eastern sky. Great position for me to image it. So I just took this image. It's 2.5 million light years away, and maybe the most distant object that we can see naked eye. From my backyard, I can often see Andromeda if the sky is clear and there's no moon. Next image, please. Actually, Chris, could you go back one? Sorry. The blob on the left is M31. Next, please. 32, sorry, 32. This is the Wizard Nebula, and it actually, the NGC notation of 7380 actually refers to the stars in this picture. It's an open cluster. And the nebula is basically invisible to naked eye. I'm sorry, even with a telescope, it's very difficult to see visually. It's about 8,500 light years away. Again, turns out looks pretty in a picture. Thank you very much.
Oh, there's nothing wrong with pretty. Andrea, please.
Oh, here I am. This was a picture I took August 13th. So this is one day before opposition. And this is Saturn with 5 of its moons. And I've been struggling with planets and trying to have nice planetary pictures for some time. So this year I took RASC's advice, which was to do monochrome camera and use filters. So I actually used 4 filters, IR, RGB filters, to make this image. And because Saturn was so close to opposition, you can see the opposition effect, which is the white glow of the rings, and which is one of the nice things about imaging Saturn at opposition. Next slide, please. And here they are all labeled. And I thought I had some information about the equipment I used in the slides. I don't know what happened to that, but this is something that I took with a Schmidt-Cassegrain, which is very similar to the telescope that you have at the Paul, that was donated by Paul Commission. And I used a planetary camera, the 290. And again, that was a recommendation of Taras. So thank you, Taras, for my most beautiful Saturn ever. Next, please. I've also used the monochrome camera. Oh, there it is. Yes, at the bottom here, you'll see my telescope. It's fading away. It's gone. The telescope and the camera. And what actually shocked me about Jupiter is Jupiter rotates really, really fast. So when you're doing planetary imaging through different filters, you have to really go fast. So I could only do a 45-second video in each of red, green, and blue. And so I ended up doing 5 sequences of red, green, and blue, red, green, and blue. And then there's this program that derotates everything, and it's all very complicated. But so far, I'm really like using the monochrome camera. It seems to have made a really big difference. And right now, obviously, these 2 planets, they're pretty high in the sky. Jupiter is incredibly high, so it's out of our atmosphere, and it's really good time to take pictures of Jupiter. Next, please. The remainder of my images are some Milky Way images that I took this summer. They're all taken with an astro-modified DSLR, which is a camera that I sent away. They remove the standard IR blocking filter, and they replace it with a hydrogen filter, which is why it's sensitive to all the red nebulous areas in the Milky Way. And this was obviously the Cygnus region. You can see the North American Nebula, and you can actually see to one side the elephant trunk. In my version that is high res, I can actually see the Veil Nebula just below the Milky Way. So this was in a very, very dark part of Ontario, which the dark skies really help. Next, please. This is an image that we call a deepscape. It is a composite in the sense that I do an image of the sky. I did a stack of Andromeda with a Nikon camera and a lens with the 135mm lens. And I also took a long exposure of the foreground. And the idea is that this is what you see through that lens on that night. And this was taken at Starfest, which is an astronomical society convention that happens north of Toronto in August. And so I was basically, the foreground image and the sky image were taken at the same location with the same camera, same lens. And then I put them together in Photoshop. Somebody asked who did the, Astromod. Spencer's camera did the astro modification of the camera. You don't really need astro modification for Andromeda, particularly because it's a broadband target. If anybody would like to know about Starfest, there were quite a few people from our organization that attended, and you might want to go next year because it's quite fun. And Paul won a really nice telescope, which was great. Next, please. So this, again at Starfest, I had a really good view of the northern Milky Way. And this was taken with a wide angle lens. I think it was my 20mm lens. And I did have it on a star tracker, so it did track a little bit. And so what I love though about this picture is, first of all, you can see a lot of green and red stripes. That's called air glow. And you see it in very, very dark skies. You can also see all kinds of nebula throughout the Milky Way. And at the very top, you can see Andromeda. And if you go to the next slide, I have it all labeled. And what was really surprising is at the very bottom, you see NGC 1499. It is the California Nebula, and it was super bright and red with this camera. Andromeda is really bright, and you can actually also see the Triangulum Galaxy. So that's how dark the skies were at Starfest, and we had two very beautiful nights. And I think that's the end of my presentation. So thank you.
Thanks, Andrea, and over to Rick.
Okay, so if pretty is okay, I hope ugly is okay too. This is a star called, well, I won't give you its name, Assassin V blah, 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 in the constellation of Lacerta. The Assassin is the all-sky automated survey for supernovae, which is a project to search for supernovae across the whole sky. Rather nice equipment. They use 400mm f2.8 camera lenses with 16 4K by 4K CCDs. They have 24 of these cameras mounted on huge equatorial mounts in I think about 6 or 8 different places around the world. So they can actually survey the entire night, the entire sky every night down to below 18th magnitude. This particular star is known as a high amplitude delta Scuti star, or a HADS. And these are main sequence stars, so they're burning hydrogen in their core. They're about twice the mass of the sun, and they pulsate. The outer layers of the star expand and contract, making the star brighter and fainter, hotter and cooler. And sometimes there are 2 layers in the outer portion of the star that actually pulsate in opposite directions. So we've been imaging this star with the RASC's remote telescope in California. We've taken 368 images so far on 11 different nights over the past month and a half, and we'll be doing another 100 or so tonight. So every image we measure the brightness of the star, and let's look next at the light curve. Oh, well, so that doesn't look very useful. You can see all the individual nights all stacked up. You can see also the last night, that was Monday night. We were observing it rather more intensely than we have in the past. Next, please. So this is the actual data from Monday night, about 8 hours of data. And you can see that there are 7 maxima, and they're each spaced about 81 minutes apart. You can also see that each maximum is slightly different. And this is an indication that this star is actually pulsating at more than one frequency at the same time. So with our initial estimate of 81 minutes between each peak, we can then look at the other night's data, find other peaks, and come up with a more accurate estimate of the period. And then what we do is we shift all the data by integer numbers of periods so that all the data overlap, all the maxima and all the minima all line up together to give us sort of an average light curve. Next. So this is called phasing the data. And you can see here's all the data that we saw on the first graph phased into, and then shown twice actually, so that you can see the entire light curve without breaks in it. So you can see there's a quick rise to maximum, followed by a slower decline in brightness. And also very subtle hints at the very bottom of a slight bump. These are usually caused by shock waves inside the star. So rather than estimating the period by sort of timing different maxima across a period of a month or so, we take the whole pile of data and we hand it off to a program called Period 04. And what it does is a Fourier analysis. It fits sine waves to the data, and it tells us that in fact the period is 0.056263 days, with an error estimate on the period of about a 25th of a second. And it also confirms that there is a second additional pulsation frequency, a period about 22.07% shorter than the fundamental. This is all very important because the numerical models that they do of stellar interiors and stuff all have a great effect on how the stars pulsate. And so by having accurate light curves and period determinations, all the various frequencies is a great constraint on the numerical modeling. So that's all I have.
That's it. Just mere science.
Yeah, just science.
Just science. So sorry to hear it. Okay, Taras, please.
Hello. I had a chance to visit former Gordon's Park. Now it's called Echo Park in Manitoulin Island. Second year in a row with a friend of mine, Konstantin Popov, member of RASC, where we had a blast under exceptionally dark skies. 2 perfect nights out of 4 where the Milky Way was extremely bright. The weather was beautiful. The stars were shining from east to west, north to south on a really dark and contrast sky. So it was a perfect 2 nights of observations mostly, or I did some imaging as well. And particularly, I took this M16 Eagle Nebula, which was a continuation of previous efforts with, this is combination now with modified hydrogen alpha sensitive camera and a regular visual image. So I wanted to get some colors to the stars because the modified camera would kind of make them all either whitish or bluish or reddish, but not much of a yellow. And I'm not sure if I still achieve that effect by combining visual image with T3i camera, but some of colors that show up along with this hydrogen glow, which is hydrogen gas in star formation regions that this nebula is known for. In the center, there is a pillar of creation, and this emission nebula is 5,700 light years away from us, well known by iconic Hubble images. Let's go to the next slide. And the recent pictures were taken, so this was Saturn taken in the night of August 28, 29. I think I oversaturated it a little bit, but yes, as Andrea mentioned, it was around a position time where when the rings glow quite bright, and it's also a combination of visual RGB plus infrared data. I apparently managed to catch Saturn's satellites, which is, if you look from a lower left to the up and left, it's Iapetus, Tethys, Bion, Rhea, and Titan, increasing in their brightness as you progress from right to left. So this was about 18.7 arc-second diameter planet, as would be seen through the telescopes, or 43.6 arc-seconds with the rings, quite large for the position. And the night when we observed it was with a perfect seeing, best perhaps I've ever seen. I took this with my Schmidt cast from FLO grounds. And if we go to the next slide, this is also the same location where this Jupiter shot was made. So this was this time with the observatory's 18-inch Star Master, and the planet will be at the opposition on September 26th. So just less than 2 weeks, or about 2 weeks from now, will be a really great sight. It's going to be really big, about 49.9 arc-seconds diameter. And it's going to be, right now, it's about 50 degrees up, and it's going to be the same this year at the highest. And it's so bright at night that there is no way you can mistake it for anything else. Starting around midnight, it's really the beautiful sight to see in the dark skies. When you go to the next slide, this is a close-up a little bit with some details showing up. It's the same idea as Andrea mentioned. So this is the visual plus a little bit of infrared added, and visual being RGB with monochrome camera plus luminosity for brightness, and a little bit of mixed infrared for the details in the brighter belts. I was lucky to see the red spot that night. It moved a little bit. So when we go to the next slide, I created a little bit of like time lapse within 15 minutes of rotation, but you can see and realize how fast the planet rotates, so that details and the red spot move that far within that period of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Taras. And I'm glad you and Andrea showing us just how fast Jupiter rotates. It's good to see. So, Tony, please.
Yes, is my audio active? Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, indeed. I can hear you.
You can hear me. Okay, good. All right. A quick review of the sun in August. I have no restraints on imaging during the week, but it just so happened that in August, the sun came out on weekends, as you see it. Next picture, please. So these are probably the two technically best pictures I've taken of whole disk mid-August. It's nice to see two images side by side from successive days. You can see how features evolve and how the sun rotates. Note that although there's some activity in the northern hemisphere, there's quite a bit more in the southern. That was very pronounced all through August. Next slide, please. Oh, and I will mention here that these are all lumped 60 millimeter telescope, 2.5 times teleview power made to slow ASI 174 camera. Did it 2 times, and these are all composite images that are made from 4 segments and false color, of course. Okay, so the morning of August 27th, I turned on my camera and I was shocked to be confronted by an M-class flare from active region 30A8, and also a fabulous giant low temperature plasma emission near the South Pole. This was not only visible in H alpha, it was very well imaged in singly ionized helium from the Solar Dynamics Observatory. That's a low temperature emission line. It peaks at about 50,000 degrees. H alpha peaks somewhere between 10 and 50,000. So this is an unusual jet of low temperature plasma being inserted up into the corona. In fact, if you look at UV images from this time, there's a hole there. Let's see here. Next slide, please. So that is just a close-up of it. You can see that the flux tubes, they don't combine with anything and they're twisted. You only see some shreds of H alpha around the sides, but in the video that you go to the FBO site, I highly recommend it. It's an interesting feature. You can see that it's fed from material coming in laterally. It meets at the pinch point. Next slide is the following day. and it's still there. There's Earth to scale finally, and you can see some little bits of that. This is an inverted disk image. And you can see some shreds of that material that's feeding it up to there. The next day, or no, sorry, later this afternoon, this feature dissolved completely into a plasma stream that squirted off to the northeast towards a coronal hole and was immediately blasted into the solar wind. Next image, please. So this was from early August the 6th. And you can see, as I was saying, that the northern hemisphere is almost devoid of features. There is a very unusual large wrinkly region that you see there. It has no sunspots, it has no flares, it's not active in any way, and yet it's extremely prominent. It took me quite a while to pin this down. It is, in fact, a unipolar magnetic region, a very large scale one. It's closely, well, it is the same thing as if you look at the magnetogram from this day, it's all positive region of the magnetic field. It's all coming out directly towards the observer. These are very curious features. They will evolve to form sunspots in active regions. They are often anchored, as this one was, directly to a coronal hole. So I'm going to try to collect more data and more imagery, and hopefully I'll be able to chat about the next one. That's all for today.
Okay, thanks, Tony. So you will be back on this subject of unipolar regions?
Pencil me in.
Yep, okay. Thanks, Matt. Chris, I see no questions. Can we move on to the challenges, please? So, okay. So last month's were the North American Nebula, Abel 2199 group, IC 4954, and the crater Borealis. This month, Oscar has presented us with Messier 56, globular cluster in Lyra, 8.3 magnitude, 8.8 minutes in diameter. It's a lovely target, should be fairly straightforward. Next, please. NGC 6905, a planetary in Delphinus, known as the Blue Flash Nebula. I don't know this one personally, but it's at a almost 11-minute apparent arc and 11 apparent magnitude and 1.2 arc seconds in diameter. That's going to make it a bit tricky, like most planetaries. Next one, Chris. UGCA. I don't even know what that collection is. UGCA 429, a lenticular galaxy in Pisces, apparent magnitude of 15, which is a stretch, and less than an arc second in each direction. That's going to be hard. Okay, Longomontanus, so lunar impact crater in the Southern Highlands, 145 kilometers deep, which is rather a lot. No, sorry, diameter, and 4.5 kilometers deep, which is not so extreme. Next, please. So there's our summary. Moving along. I think this is the last scheduled star party for the year, and Andrea can tell me if I'm wrong. Friday, September 30, at the normal car park of the Ottawa Public Library in Carp, i.e. next to the Defen bunker, and that's where we need to go. Next, please. FLO, Fred Lossing Observatory, member only, what do we call it? Privilege, but you can bring guests. The next star party is on 24th of September. Could be a fallback date there. Doug will let us know. Next slide, please, Chris. Normal club information, FLO Director Rick Scholes, we've heard from many times tonight, book library equipment and stuff that requires being in place, not so relevant at the moment. Membership issues with Art Fraser. You get club discounts on Sky and Telescope and Astronomy subscription renewals with Stuart Glenn. Next, please. Audience tonight, Chris.
I saw 54 maximum number at any one time, so we probably had about 60 unique people tonight.
Okay, and those that weren't here should be assassinated. Meanwhile, thanks to our guest, apart from me and Chris, Dave, Rick Scholes, Paul, Richard, and Rick, and our observation presenters. Our host for this web service is the RASC National Office, and we thank them for that. Ideas, comments, criticisms, whatever about the meeting to me at meetingchair@ottawa.rasc.ca. Next, please. The videos will be up on our stonking good website. Astronotes are also available there. All the presentations from tonight, even some of the comments. Moving on. Next meeting, Friday, October the 14th, again for 3 times in a row, the second Friday of the month, because of astrology. And so with that, I wish you all good night. Again, all comments to me, meetingchair@ottawa.rasc.ca, and hoping to see you on October the 14th, same bat time, same bat channel. Cheers.